I'll start over here just real quick for catching everybody up. So Tobin Williams, I lead the experience design team at Consumers Energy. I was just saying that my background is really in marketing and business administration, if you will. Spent most of my career with agencies in Metro Detroit in the automotive environment. Decided in the early 2000s that it was time for a change. I spent a few years at a little technical studio in Metro Detroit, and then about 10 years ago joined Consumers Energy. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Consumers Energy, I'll give you just a quick overview of who we are and what we're about. I'll start out by saying I never expected in a million years that I would be working for a utility. When I first started learning about them, what really drew me to the company is the culture, the commitment to Michigan, local, and really this kind of emerging focus for a utility to be hyper focused on our customers and what we can do to influence the environment and sustainability and things like that. So that's going to be a common thread that you'll hear from me as I go along. So Consumers Energy, if you're not familiar, is actually the fourth largest gas and electric utility provider or energy service provider in the United States. I've been around for 135 years, about 8,000 employees, and in total, we serve about 7 million residents of Michigan, about 3.7 million customers, about $6 billion annual revenue. And you know, we basically are a full service energy service provider. So from generation of electricity, transmission, distribution, and then natural gas facilities throughout kind of the east side of the state. West side is electric service, and the central part of the state, we do both. Let's see, if we were having this conversation 6 months ago even, we would be talking about how we're really proud that we are going to be coal-free by 2040. And in the last few months, we've decided that that's just not good enough, that we as a company have this opportunity to really set the bar for the state, for our constituents in the state, our customers, and really for the rest of the energy sector. And so just in the past 6 months, we've decided that we will be coal-free by 2025. So we're now measuring that goal within a matter of weeks instead of months. We've declared that we will help put 1 million EVs on the road within our service territory, about 2 million statewide by 2030, which is about 3 times faster than most forecasts say that is going to be able to happen. And just a couple of weeks ago, we announced that our natural gas system will be completely decarbonized by 2050. Now, this takes a very bold, confident leadership team to be able to make these types of declarations. We've seen a lot of utilities across the country kind of start to follow suit, which is exactly what we want to do. We want to really challenge the status quo. But what's exciting about being in the experience design group is we don't necessarily know how we're going to do these things yet. And so we are very comfortable as a company making these breakthrough declarations and then figuring it out, knowing that that's where we have set the target, rather than just kind of incremental continuous improvements that won't move us as far along. So as a company, our experience design team is very involved in influencing the strategic direction of the company, in problem solving, how we're going to close these big gaps, and really kind of at the tip of the spear for the organization in defining what it is we can do, how we can get there, and using design thinking to really help drive that. We really feel strongly that if we put our customers at the forefront of our thought process, that pretty much anything is possible. So as a utility, obviously, focus is always going to be on safety, heavy engineering organization, obviously dealing with dangerous energy, types of energy and things like that. But in that prioritization mix for our strategy is a focus on our customers. So coming from utility, I'll tell a little bit of the story here and some evidence as we go along. Customers don't necessarily expect real high service from utilities. The bar is low. However, we know that everything we do is going to add value. And we know that just because we're a utility doesn't mean that we can't affect people's lives and provide a world-class customer service. So it's our job to figure out how to do that. Oops, let's get this going right. So why does Consumers Energy care so much about customer experience? So the easy answer to that is that we've been around for 135 years. We want to be around for another 135 years. There's an incredible amount of disruption happening in the sector in the last couple of years, and we can either let that happen to the sector or we can be a driver of that. From a financial perspective, for the last 10 years, we have exceeded Wall Street's forecasts and expectations, and we need to have a very solid plan to continue that. But a big part of that is putting our customers first and making sure that we're providing those products and services that our customers want to get from us. So what does that look like? So as being an energy provider and walking away from coal in the near term, we're really looking at a lot more solar products and services. Wind is obviously becoming a big play. We have 13 hydroelectric dams across the state. We have one of the few pump storage facilities, which I'll talk a little bit later, out on the west side of the state. But we're also looking at demand management. So part of the story is, and I'm probably skipping ahead here a little bit from future slides, but as we're reducing that demand, or as we're addressing that generation coming from our coal, we can do that through wind and solar and things like that. But the reality is that helping save cost and closing that demand gap, a big part of that is by influencing customer demand. So if last year we gave away 60,000 Nest thermostats. How are we putting the tools into people's hands where they can really manage their energy use, whether that's by themselves or subscribing to programs and services through us to help them manage through peak energy demand times, hot days, cold days, things of that nature. And I'll talk a little bit about more of that in a couple minutes. So how do we get there? We get there through solid design up front. We're getting there through evaluation of existing products and services. And we're doing that by introducing new products and services that our customers want. So this is just a montage of the types of things that our team gets involved in. We do a lot of qualitative research. We do a lot of discovery and observation and things like that with customers. We've got design studios in a couple locations around the state that we really use for co-collaboration. We bring customers in, we'll bring our crews in if they're involved in a particular project we're working on. We bring the state regulators in to really all work side by side in order to address our biggest challenges. And I'll dive into a few of these examples here in just a minute. So just a little bit kind of a walk of how we started on our experience design journey. Back in 2013, we started deploying smart meters. So just like a smartphone was for the telecom industry in really transitioning from analog to digital, the smart meters across the country, across the globe, actually, have really been that trigger for the energy sector. So historically, Consumers Energy and utilities like us, when we're doing a piece of hardware swap out like a meter, the meter belongs to the company. And we would say, hey, we have the right, if you will, to go onto that customer's property. We'll put the new meter on. And when the customer gets home, maybe their clocks are blinking from being out of power for power interruption for a couple seconds. But people can Google how to solve that, and we're just going to move on. And we've got 2 million meters that we need to get replaced. We're just going to do that and go get started. Instead, we looked at this as an opportunity to reintroduce ourselves to our customers as a company, what our vision is, what benefits come from this type of a digital change, and what to expect from us as a company in the coming years. So we brought in IDEO as a design consultant, if you will. We went out and talked to customers, and we spent the better part of really a year looking at different types of communications. What was it the customers were interested in? How do we take this to market in terms of frequency of communication, the type of communication, and how do we train our employees and our contractors to talk about this? And so we really use this as kind of our first catalyst to really rethink how we do business and to really change kind of the attitudes of how we're interacting with our customers. So coming out of that, our next big opportunity for transformation was really in the digital space. So this is probably about 2 years after I started. We recognized that we really hadn't done much in our digital platforms for probably a decade. I can tell you stories that would just, let's just say it wasn't good. Our experiences online were not good. And we identified that we really just needed to start over. So we did a complete ground up digital transformation. We really created a charter for the project. So typically a charter documents who's involved and what's in scope and what's out of scope, and it gets a pretty tight document. We decided to take a really different approach, and we decided that this is going to be a 18-month to 2-year project. We're going to learn a lot along the way. And so we really wrote our charter for the company and for the executives to sign off on it in a way that gave us flexibility to adjust. So we didn't say what was going to be in and out of scope. We said, here's the principles of what we're going to deliver. And we put the customer experience first. We identified certain areas that were under consideration. We identified that we were going to completely redo all of our payment structures. As a utility, you've got people coming in and paying your bill every month, and our payment systems were really not good and not consistent. So really use that as our starting point to really give ourselves the flexibility to change and pivot as we learned going through this. Built out a design studio, so we had everybody from our compliance teams to our digital teams to our programmers all working in the same space. We created personas for our users. Really didn't know it until we were kind of coming out the tail end on this, but this is really where we learned how to develop in an agile environment, and we were really starting to use design thinking processes. As part of this, we introduced CXI as our customer metric, and still today, CXI is our driving customer satisfaction metric. Our CEO carries it on his scorecard, and every person in the company by 10 a.m. every morning knows exactly what our CXI was on the prior day. And on my team, we can actually tell you that our CXI for people who paid with a credit card online the prior day was a CXI of a particular number versus somebody who went into an office and paid. And so we can really look at that every single day and know, hey, if something breaks, we're going to know right away. We don't need to wait for the customers to call us and say, hey, there's a problem or something's not working. So really gives us a great pulse on what's happening in the company. And it also gives us the opportunity to go extend ourselves really anywhere in the organization as the CXI owners to say, hey, we've identified that this particular area of the company is a hotspot for improvement, and we'd like to come in and help. And we all carry that goal. And it really just is that invitation for us to go collaborate anywhere in the organization on customer-centric projects that we want to pursue. So this is an interesting and kind of unusual based on other companies that I've talked to. When we were getting started on this and really looking at this from a utility and knowing that we have this perception of us as a company with most customers as being bureaucratic, hard to get a hold of, really don't care about the customer, we really needed to understand how customers perceived us and what we had the potential to be perceived as. So we brought in a social anthropologist by the name of Dr. Rapai. He's out of France. He works with a lot of big brands and did some I'm happy to share more stories after this, but very intriguing discovery processes with customers to really get to the kind of reptilian or nascent beliefs and perceptions that people have of a utility, of energy, of consumers' energy specifically. And not surprising, a lot of the traits that came out of that is that people equate us to the government. Many people think that we are a government organization just because of how we behave and how we operate. It's not very customer centric. And then we did the potential of who can we be? And that came back as really being a first responder. So during times of storm, people are running inside for safety. The blue and white consumers' energy trucks are heading out into the storm to restore power, getting people's lives back, bringing back their ability to proceed with life, if you will, and with their families. So really, our kind of hallmark imagery to really capture that spirit is our line workers, our people in hard hats and things of that nature. So the more that we can present ourselves as always training, always prepared, there when you need us, really resonates with a kind of an ideal that is a very positive thread for our customers. So knowing where we're starting today and knowing what we have potential to do really infuses a lot of the underlying work and language and things that we use as we're developing customer experience. So building on that and a lot of other research, we as you can imagine, we're working on experiences across the company, across channels. We need to know what success looks like. So using this archetype research, using different brand research, emotional signature research, we really have been working on this aspirational goal. So any experience that we're creating, we have the ability to measure whether or not we're delivering to our ideal state. And that way our experiences are starting to become more consistent across the board. So we are defining what that experience means on these pillars of passionate and intuitive, dependable and trusted, and then how that feels. So as we're doing customer testing and a new experience that we've launched, we can start to do some of that emotional testing of actually grasping specific words that we know are tying back to what is the feeling we want to leave, and continue to just do kind of micro adjustments in experience to continue to optimize this and learn whether or not, if someone says they're happy, is that better than if they say they're pleased or something of that nature. So in some of our experiences, we're getting very detailed in terms of how surface level we're getting. And it all depends on where we are in kind of that maturity, but understanding what success looks like, this really becomes a point that everybody in the organization can be aware of and design to, from brand to a digital team or something of that nature. So the experience design team. So started out when I joined the company with one person. It was an individual that really knew our digital space and our payments and things of that nature. She really helped me get my footing and just start to tackle big problems and not be afraid to jump in. And over the last 10 years, our experience design team has now grown to, I'll say 25 to 30 people. We're growing pretty quickly at the moment. But as I said, coming out of that digital project, and we're really starting to learn agile and learn design thinking. Our leadership team came to me and some of my colleagues, and the question was, well, can you take what you did with digital and can you replicate it across other areas of the company? And the answer is, sure, we can. Why? We didn't really know, but we're like, of course, feels like we could do that. So we were given 5 people, and so we're given 5 people in actually 1 year. And so what we did is we took a person and assigned each of those 5 people to one of our primary experiences on the utility side. So in the utility, you've got billing, you've got payments. For electric utility, you've got frequent outages with storms and things of that nature. You have people moving in and moving out of your territory all the time. And so we basically took each of these individuals and we assigned them a journey. And we gave them really 6 months to a year to go out and study what is it in the utility that creates our experience current state. So we looked at processes, we looked at regulatory rules, we looked at our own internal policies, we looked at our tech stacks, we looked at the way the organization was structured and who did what, and really came up with this system thinking map of this is why our current billing experience or payment experience or outage experience is what it is today. And then we were given the grace to say, okay, go out and study what you want to be aspirational. So we looked at companies literally around the globe of how did they deliver experiences, and what would world-class really look like. And so coming out of this first year post the digital transformation, we ended up with a current state understanding, a future state aspiration, and then we broke it down into a 3 to 5 year roadmap of what are the transformational things that we need to do as a company to really take us from current state to aspirational state. And we're continuing to work those roadmaps and refine those roadmaps today. So fast forward to where we are today. Again, we have this team that's still working on these journeys on the utility side. But we also today, as we're building out these, we have 50 to 60 what we call retail products and services. So these are programs that you as a customer can elect to participate in. So maybe it's an energy efficiency program, or you want to recycle an old refrigerator and get a rebate. Maybe you want to put new windows in your home, something of that nature. Maybe you want to get renewable energy for your home, EV products and services, and then demand response. There's programs and services that we incentivize in different ways to reduce energy use. So that's our retail team. And so basically the structure or the format that we've created across our utility team and our retail team is what you're looking at on the screen here. We have an experience designer. The experience designer is really looking at future state. They're end-to-end experience designers. So these are people who are comfortable being generalists in a double diamond kind of design process, out doing discovery, qualitative research. How might we, what's the problem, right? What's the persona? What's the user experience, buyer experience, whatever that might be? How might you solve that problem? And then going into that solutioning and iteration until you get to a minimally viable product or a applicable prototype or something of that nature. And our designers really look out, I'll say, a year and beyond. So they're really looking to be a little more transformational. They're really driving future state for the company. And as they get projects stood up, they hand it over to an experience, I'm sorry, not as they stand up, as they get to that clickable prototype or that minimally viable product, we have delivery specialists on our team. These are people who are very comfortable running an IT team, running Scrum meetings, doing iterative releases. And so they're the ones that come in, they understand the requirement, they take the torch from the designer who's knows what they want, and they really treat that designer as their client internally and become the steward of that project as it goes through a delivery process in the company. Once that launches, it then gets handed over to an experience owner, which is typically either in our team or in a functional part of the organization that owns that new standard, that new experience that's been launched. And then they work in a kind of 12 months and closer cycle, as opposed to the designer working further out. And they're doing that constant measurement of how is that experience delivering against our targets and what can they do to continuously improve it, whether it's a new feature, whether it's a language change or something of that nature. And so we kind of just have this cycle of design, delivery, and ownership and that continuous improvement within our team. And so we have that by an outage experience. There's a team of 3. In billing and payment, we have a team of 5. If moving is 1 plus some shared resources, and then the field experience is out. People are doing major upgrades in systems or digging up your yard or something like that. We've got a team of a couple people that do that type of work as well from a communications perspective and some process design behind the scenes. So from our team, we have kind of this full circle of a designer, a delivery, and the owners that are really maintaining that experience. And we work very cross-functionally in the organization. So it's not unusual for us to be sitting down with field members and engineers and things of that nature to make sure that these things are working the way we want them to. I'll pause there. Any questions on any of that before I keep going? Okay. So I'll give you a few examples. So for outage, this is storm outage. So we have storm outage, we have blue sky outage when the power goes out and the sun's out and you wonder why. Maybe there's an accident or some equipment failure or something like that. And then we have a planned outage. So when we are doing service upgrades and need to maybe take a system down in order to go in and replace transformers or rebuild something, that's something that we know is coming. We can do communication up front. So the experiences and the customer's expectations are very different in all 3 of those scenarios, and we design unique experiences in order to meet those. All these experiences are kind of mapped and planned out of what we want to be aspirationally, and they're in different phases of that kind of journey that I mentioned. So the experience manager, again, is kind of looking at this big picture, future state. Where do they want to go? How are we measuring success? This is kind of a story from an outage perspective. In a utility, utilities traditionally measure their reliability based on the total number of minutes that customers are out, the number of times that customers are out, and like the duration of individual outages. They're very macro, big picture measurements. And so we as an experience design team, out talking to customers and doing a lot of research, identified that during an outage, those metrics really don't mean anything. And yet as a utility, that's what was driving all of our investment and behavior. So what we identified in an outage, that a customer cares what really adds the most value, if you look at kind of the curves of satisfaction, what drives the most outage are four things. Number one, that we are acknowledging proactively to a customer that we know they're out of power within 10 minutes of their losing power. They want to receive an estimated time that they're going to be restored, and they don't want that restored. They don't want that initial acknowledgement plus 2 updates. If you update more than twice, confidence and you know what you're talking about goes out the window. And that the final estimated time of restoration, if you restore power 2 hours before that restoration, your satisfaction is pretty low. The closer you get to it, that grows. And then you've got about 10 minutes after that expires to get the power on. Otherwise, that satisfaction falls off a cliff. So we are kind of understanding this collection of customer metrics, brought this into the organization. And now these are the metrics that we are actually using as an organization rather than these big macro utility metrics on what's actually driving customer satisfaction and our ability to restore. We know during a storm that during a big storm, people can see damage, right? It's in the news. You have about 24 hours to get that power back on. But they want to be told why the power's out. They want to know what your status is in terms of evaluating the damage and making progress. So there's a lot of communication pieces that go into that along the way. So there's some examples of the types of things that we get deeply involved in. And then, so I already pivoted into this a little bit. So the experience owner is really looking at those storm communications, putting communications out to customers in Nextdoor, in social media, by email, letting them know, hey, weather's coming, here's how you can prepare. We're in the storm, here's what Consumers Energy is doing, here's how many crews are in your area, things of that nature. And then post communication, here's the result. How many customers were out? How long were you out? What else is being done to clean up or to create more reliability in the system? Our team introduced community response teams. So following a model that insurance companies use, restoring after a major tornado or some other weather event like that, flood. You see Allstate and State Farm just flooding the area with assessors and putting checks in people's hands. So in a power outage, it's one thing to go out and get that power back on, but what are we doing to help people kind of maintain their needs or stay cool or stay warm? So we've developed actually an entire department now that is community response teams. So during a storm, we can really isolate those customers that are going to be out the longest. We put crews and trucks of volunteers from the company out there handing out ice cream, hotel rooms if we need, cold water, hot drinks, warming centers, whatever that may be, but really driving that customer experience to help them get through that challenge. We have customer information officer that is part of our incident command system, our incident command structure in the company, that is a member of my team that during a storm is really making those decisions for the company on where do we need to be, what should we be messaging differently, what do we need to be doing, what are we hearing in terms of that customer feedback in order to truly make a difference and help buy, frankly, the field time more time to be out there to safely restore that power. Moving experience, just another example of what we've done. You see in the top right there, kind of that journey along different areas over multiple years. Journey map to the left of that, really looking at what is our process of moving, the stages, who's involved in the emotional journey from the customer's expectations versus how well we're meeting those kind of intense emotional times internally as well. This typically, when we started this experience, again, 4 or 5 years ago, moving was really the intent of that was getting someone to sign up so we could send them a bill. That was really what give us your address, make sure you've got an account there so that every month you've got a way to pay us. And we've really, over the last several years, turned this into an opportunity to really introduce ourselves to customers, tell them the types of programs and services that they have options with, get to know them, build out a profile so that we can be more one-on-one communicating with them. And that we now look at the moving experience rather than this opportunity to bill is an opportunity to really create a one-on-one experience of what is that customer interested in. Do they want things that are going to help them manage cost or increase comfort, or are they interested in renewable energy? How can we best meet their needs as a energy services provider rather than just being a utility? Little things that we experiment with, if you see in the lower right corner, we identified from a CXI perspective that if we send people a thank you card, sorry, not thank you card, a welcome to the neighborhood card within 3-4 days of their arriving, CXI from a customer for their own perception of the company goes up 3 to 4 points. So just a lot of just kind of testing of what are those little touch points that we can build into our communications on and really build out that engagement with our customers. So that's kind of like the Chewy model, right? You got your dog's birthday card, you get your trying new treats or whatever. Like what else can we do to really kind of meet that expectation that's being set elsewhere in the marketplace? So back to kind of the clean energy transformation. So I mentioned that by 2025 we're going to be be coal free. So where's that power? What's that going to come from? And I mentioned demand response. So the importance of why experience design plays such a strategic role in the company really comes down to this. So as a utility, we're required to provide as much electricity to the state as is needed pretty much instantaneously. So in Michigan, that means during hot summer afternoons between the hours of say 2 and 7 p.m. For about 14 minutes a year, we have these huge spikes in demand from residential air conditioning. And so we've all been in Michigan through a summer, you've kind of lived through that. And so really that challenge that our executive team really made is, instead of bringing more power generation online, how do we actually reduce the demand of those peaks? So by putting programmable thermostats in people's homes, and offering those at a steep discount, if not for free, signing them up for services based on their particular interest where they can control those thermostats. So if we know 24 hours in advance that we're going to hit one of those peaks, rather than buying electricity off the open market when it's incredibly expensive, or firing up a generating plant that's coal powered, or those things are very costly to fire up. They take time to fire up, and you're not going to run your least efficient plants all the time. So we have these kind of peaker plants. So how do we solve this peaker plant demand and this peak load challenge? It's really about that engagement with the customer demand. So whether a customer wants to manage that themselves, whether they want to sign up to let us actually manage their thermostat for them during those times. In some cases, we can even pre-cool a house. So someone says, all right, my tolerance threshold is a certain level of temperature. We see that peak event coming. We'll actually pre-cool their home remotely. Most people never even know we're doing it, so that the house is maybe 3 or 4 degrees cooler than they would typically keep it before that peak gets met. When the peak happens, turn off that air conditioner, let the home naturally warm up during the peak. And by the time it needs to fire up again, typically we're past the peak and you've shaved that load. You don't need to load up that extra plant or make that purchase on the market. So the reality is, if this is going to be our strategy as a company, to not go build another $1 billion power plant or buy off the market, and we want to actually influence customer behavior, this is like a grand social experiment. If we want to influence that customer behavior, it's absolutely critical that they trust us, that they're willing to engage in us. And we know through our past 10 years of learning that our historic position with customers, most people aren't going to let you inside their home to do that. So from an experience design perspective for consumers' energy, this is building great experiences, changing people's perceptions, building that trust from that aspiration, accomplishing that aspirational experience that I shared earlier is an absolute strategic imperative. And that's why, and this is the question of why is consumers' energy investing so much in experience design? Because our long-term strategy and ability to meet these sustainability goals depends on the relationship we have with our customers. So our experience design team, I kind of mentioned, we've got designers, we've got product owners, we've got some delivery specialists, building out this retail products and services group. Our plan is really to assemble a team. So let me back up. The utility team I mentioned is based on journey. So it's outages, billing and payment, things of that nature. On our retail team, we're much more customer aligned. So there's residential, there's small, medium business, and there's commercial and industrial. So we have designers that are generalists that manage this kind of end-to-end experience partnering with product owners, and really looking at, what's the market problem these products are solving, what are the personas, what's the buyer experience, the user experience, the advocacy experience, and really making these products and services the best in class, the best that they can be. And then we also are building out a design ops organization. So a team that really is specializing in those more advanced research, visual design. We got a program ops person that's really creating our standards as a team, intake processes and things of that nature, really creating that engine that allows these designers to really excel and do what they do best every single day. And then we want to talk a little about interview. I'll pause. Any questions on any of that? I'm happy to answer anything you've got.
Any question? Hey, Zoom student, do you have any question? Zoom? Okay, let me ask a question. In your design, UX design team, how's the educational background of team members?
Yeah, that's a great question. So most of our team members that have been with us for the last several years, up until this time where we're building out the retail team. We're really bringing in a lot of people with functional expertise within the organization and training them to be designers. So my first 5 that came into the organization, into billing and payment, into outage, into moving, because they knew how that worked internally and can really help us understand what that internal ecosystem looks like. And we invested really heavily in them. We've been, not to drop school names, but we brought Stanford in. We sent people to Harvard. We have partnerships with other design agencies in Michigan. And we really worked hard to get folks comfortable with design processes, and we continue to build those every single day. With the team that we're building out now, in fact, it's starting 2021, we had 19 open positions. And really the posture that we've taken for that is, in rough terms, my goal has been to bring in about 1/3 of those people internally to continue that model of people that know the culture, they're connected, they know how to get things done, they've got functional expertise, and kind of can be that go-to to help answer questions of how can I move quickly through the organization. They've got the relationships. 1/3 of the individuals we're looking for people who have been in the design space, actively engaged, hopefully outside of the utility sector, for, call it 5 to 10 years or more, really bringing in some high-end expertise in the design space. And then 1/3 of our individuals we're looking for recent grads, people that are just coming out. They've been classically academically trained in design thinking, have done internships or projects on teams, and are just coming in with fresh ideas, not jaded by any other past organizations, really able to just ask those questions to really help us make sure that we're thinking with really open minds, and then creating that collaboration across the team. So those individuals may be assigned to the residential sector or the commercial industrial sector or something like that, but that's the product team they're serving. Behind the scenes, a lot of collaboration. So we've got people mentoring, we've got people that are being mentored, a lot of cross learning, and we're basically, as we're bringing in this number of people, maintaining our culture is critically important to us, and investing in these individuals to learn the company, like how does the utility actually work, learn their product space that they're assigned to supporting, getting to know each other so we know what each other's strengths are, and being able to leverage each other collaboratively. So essentially we're building out our capacity to basically an 80% level, so that 1 day a week, or the equivalent of 1 day a week, is our team working with each other, sharing ideas, being together, learning, and not heads down on a project or in meetings and things like that. So it's really easy to have an established team and bring 1 or 2 people in and just let them catch up. But we're doubling in size essentially, and know that we've got to invest in the people and create that dynamic where we can really get optimized. And by the end of this year, really be a very mature organization that is working well together. A very long answer to your question, but the short answer is 1/3 of the individuals internally, 1/3 highly experienced, and 1/3 coming out of HCI, design, interactive design type programs, UI, UX. What else? Good question.
How is the CXI calculated?
Yeah, so CXI is 3 questions. So it is how well are we meeting your needs? How easy are we to interact with? And how enjoyable is your experience? And then those are calculated kind of like a net promoter score. So it's a 5-point scale. Your 5s are promoters, your 1s and 2s are detractors. Subtract the detractors from your promoters, and that gives you your score. So world class is considered by Forrester Research as to be a 75. As a utility, we are, I'm sorry, 80. No, it's either 75 or 85, forgive me. It's up there. As a utility, we're at a 63 at a brand level, but we measure CXI at a transactional level as a company, every billing and payment experience, outage experience. And we've gotten to the point with an outage experience, we used to be, negative numbers from, obviously you're not delivering your service, right? People are out of power. We can actually get through a 24-hour outage now and have an outage CXI for people who are out of power at a 70, which is incredible. Never thought we'd be there. We're pivoting next year to using a customer effort score and an NPS. And so with our retail products and services, really looking at that willingness to recommend and some metrics like that as well.
I had a question about the social research that you mentioned. I want to know what, if anything, are you doing in terms of helping consumers build the kind of behaviors that you want them to build to support the company in turn with the surge that you mentioned? I thought that was very interesting. I'd like to know more.
Yeah, are you talking about the R-type study or some of the other research? I didn't catch it.
Oh, the social research for behavior change.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So most of our kind of that behavioral research is happening in the call centers and kind of that front line. So how are we using language? So for example, let me pivot back to this slide. Traditionally in a utility, your call centers and things like that are very well trained, but they're also heavily scripted. And so really a lot of this kind of behavioral training with call centers has been a invitation and coaching on how to really let your personality to shine through, right? So what you're measuring people on is not following a script. It's, are you accomplishing the goal that customer has, and how well are you able to just kind of be yourself in that conversation, and be approachable, be compassionate, to have that customer really feel like they've been listened to. We've put people through formal linguistics training, so being able to identify very quickly whether this customer is even male female differences. There's words that you would use that you don't use with a different gender. There's just being really very sensitive to actually the language and the delivery of that training. We have not delivered that type of training to our field organization yet. That's kind of on our continuing roadmap. We are very influential in our brand organization. So whether it's advertising or brand communications, really in any channel, there's language actually tying back to that archetyping research that I mentioned. Words like restoring, I'm trying to think of other examples. Anything that like indicates bringing life back into a system or a process is really powerful with customers. So we don't talk about turning your power back on. We talk about restoring your power, and responding to particular calls to action and things like that. So it's probably the best answer I can give you, but I'm happy to take a follow-up.
Thank you.
Anything else?
You said that during the outage, you sent to the customer the text messages regarding the outage. So there must be some content in that. So how do you user trace that content? And specifically, what should be sent to the customer, that the behavior of that customer is the intended one. How do you user test?
How do we user test that?
Yeah.
Let's see, let me follow that example specifically. So we have, we do testing when you're not in storm to begin with. So a lot of just language testing of how are people interpreting what it is we're trying to say. And that's literally just bringing people in or doing remote testing of, how does this read to you? Do you understand it? Is it presenting itself well visually? And that's, we go through kind of waves of cycles of testing that, especially if we start to get some indication that our scores are kind of gradually declining or something of that nature. Online, a lot of recording of user sessions to see how people are navigating a site, and are there drop-offs at particular points, or are they trying to click in places that we weren't intending for them to do? How are they interpreting language, things like that. We do A/B testing for different messages on, whether it's text or emails and things like that. Just again, once you've got that standard, test two things, pick the one that's best, test that against something else, and just continue to take that standard up a notch. So COVID has really interrupted a lot of our in-person testing. We used to have at one of our labs, we would bring people in literally every week, just 2 or 3 people, right? And just say, let's pretend you're in an outage and let's talk through this. We also do measurement after an outage. Say 3 to 5 days after customers have been out, we will send them a pretty extensive email survey and find out how do they recall communications before, during, and after the storm. So we know that customers who actually recall getting a communication from us in advance of a storm, during a storm, and after a storm can have a CXI of say 72. If they only recall one of those pre, during, or none of those, your scores are going to be in the teens. So just the fact that we're sending communications out that are catching attention, using imagery, sharing them what the impact of that storm has been in a visual way. Because you might be out of power and you look out your window and everything's it was a little bit windy, but if you can send them something from that county or that zip code that is, the picture of the trampoline that's dangling from the power lines, then you can make it real, and they can, you can buy yourself a little bit of understanding and empathy why it's taking so long to get that power back on. So a lot of our efforts right now are actually optimizing how are we capturing the cause of an outage, and literally getting imagery that we can use and passes all of our compliance and legal rules and things like that to actually tell those stories of here's what's happening. And for us to be more transparent, because it's just a big part of the challenge we have as utility is just the perception that we don't care. And so how do we make ourselves accessible, open to questions? And if we don't know, or if we screw up, be honest about it. We should have done better. This storm, especially Michigan, right? There's times that we will bring in dozens of crews and have them staged around the state, and at considerable expense to do that, right? You're paying people overtime and you're moving, massive pieces of equipment, and you're sure this storm is going to hit, and then it never shows up. And then there's the ones that look like little blips on the radar, and it's okay, we're not going to worry about that one. It looks like we're all right. And sure enough, that's the one that, the tornado comes in and takes out, big pieces of equipment, people out for 3 or 4 days. So we've gotten to the point where we're probably as good. We've got all sorts of weather services we subscribe to and things like that. But it's from a testing perspective, it's testing when things are calm. It's testing after the storm. And then during the storm, we literally have our CXI questions. Anytime you're coming to the outage map or the outage center or calling, we survey about 10% of our customers at all times on, did you accomplish your goal? Do we meet your need? How easy? And was the experience enjoyable? So again, long answer, sorry. What else?
So I noticed you mentioned the word perception and its importance to your day-to-day activities. And perception tends to go hand in hand with trust. Do you have any examples of some research findings or some design inputs that you and your team have made to kind of help overcome that barrier of perception and trust?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. So, I mean, perception is really everything, right? That's the proverb holds true. There's people that will have a power outage, for example, and they may only be out for 3 hours from our perspective, right? We know, got the smart meter, we know they're out from 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock, and to us, it's a 3-hour window. To that customer, who knows what disruption that caused? Maybe they needed to, reschedule a party, or lost a bunch of food in the refrigerator. And so, they need to go out shopping. The impact of that outage may actually be, a day or 2 days, even though they may have only been out for 3 hours. So you ask them how long you're out of power, they're going to tell you, I was out for 18 hours. In reality, we know it was only 3, but in their mind, we need to understand the impact that has and build our processes and communications so that we are actually reflecting their reality and that pain they're feeling. It does us absolutely no good to go out and say, well, actually, you're wrong. You weren't out for 18 hours. It was only 3, and that's not a big deal. Who's that for us to say, right? So that perception piece is really important. And going back to the story I told about the outage metrics, knowing what is important and what's driving value and measuring the right thing means everything. If we're not measuring the right thing that's adding value and capturing what customers feel, which feels kind of strange to say that in a utility or in business, but that is critically important. And luckily, we've got a leadership team that really buys into that emotional component and how important that is. And Andrea, feel free to hit me with a follow-up if I didn't quite answer your full question.
No, you definitely did. But I do have another question that's unrelated. Earlier, you mentioned that when you're looking for potential candidates, you're also looking for people outside of the energy sector.
Yep.
And so I'm curious if you have any tips or feedback for us as we go to make these career changes and apply for different roles on how we can highlight the value of having the outside opinion. What are the kind of things you look for?
So a great question. So I'll pivot over to my slide. I can answer that from my perspective, and obviously, you talk to different people in different industries, you're going to get very different answers. From my perspective, and anybody that really I think is coming from a design background, that diversity of background, diversity of thought, diversity of formal training is so critically important. We want people who are looking at problems differently. We want people who solve problems in different ways to be on that team. The more dimension and perspectives that we can bring into a problem-solving scenario, the more open-minded and creative we're going to be getting as in terms of an output. So I can tell you some stories of how we're kind of solving that and where we're struggling to solve that, if that's of interest. I think my single biggest, especially going into a design program and talking to people who are hiring designers, my single personal piece of advice going into that is understand, truly appreciate whatever your experience set is, whatever files it is that you have, they're valuable. And don't take them for granted. Really reflect on your background, your story, your experiences, whether it's formally in school or outside of school, whether it's, some hardship you've been through personally. Being really transparent, at least in our world, of that background and thinking that makes you who you are and bring that dimension in. You don't know, you don't know what's going to trigger a thought or have, the person that you're talking to or interviewing with kind of have that light bulb go off of like, wait a minute, I can use that. So it's easy to, Google like top interview questions and prepare for the, your standard barrage of interview questions. But regardless of what question you get, I would always go into an interview with your top stories. What are your wins? What are your experiences? The thing you're most proud of, the thing that was your biggest challenge that you overcame. And be prepared to tell those stories that make you who you are and who make you unique, and just tell that story in a way that frames into the question. So whether it's exactly hey, this was my biggest challenge, or whether this is my biggest strength, or whatever that is, know the stories of that really define you and make you unique, and be prepared to tell those from a couple different angles to match the question. You want to answer the question, right? But be prepared to actually pull those stories out of your life and apply them into that question, so that you're not leaving an interview with anything left on the table, right? There's things that you want that interviewer to know, and regardless of what that question is, figure out a way to weave those in and bring that diversity to life. Sorry, I'm pontificating.
No, that was great. Thank you so much.
Hello.
So you want me to pivot into interview things for real quick? So this is tough because the more I think about this, the more I could just go on. And I've been doing a lot of interviewing. I'm told that my interviewing style and our process is unique. So I think my first caveat to all of this is talk to a lot of people and see what else is out there in different perspectives. Know that organization and their approach. If you are landing an interview with somebody, don't be afraid to ask, like, what's the format? What should I expect? Never want to go into an interview just completely like cold and not know what you're walking into. I would say we all have some sort of idea in the back of our mind of what we want to do. May not know how that applies. So I would say know what you want, but don't put yourself in a box, because regardless of what your degree is or what your background is, there's so many different ways to apply a degree in a way that you would never even imagine. Use those every interviewing opportunity. Never say no to an interview, first of all. Take them all, get the practice, and just use them as learning opportunities. And if you're turning down jobs, more power to you. But go in open-minded and really learn how people are exploring what your background might be and how you might apply it. And if you define yourself, be confident in knowing what your passions are and your strengths are. That's really important. Be confident, but don't put yourself in a box either. You want to stay open-minded and let the opportunities as they cross your path be things that you're interested in considering. So there's two. I had a mentor not too long ago that really made this clear for me. There's kind of two ways to take on a career. Number one, you want to be a CEO or a CMO or something like that, and you're literally building out a plan and exactly the stepping stones and experiences you want in order to get to that goal. If you've got that clarity of mind of what you want, that's fantastic. I never had that. I just kind of, the other way is you stay open-minded to opportunities, and you look for those things that, am I going to regret not trying this, and just taking on those new challenges as they show up. But I wish that someone had kind of made that clarity for me when I was first coming out of school of like, hey, because I always felt like I needed to answer the question of what do you want to be and what do you want to do? And I never had a clue. So recognize that there's individuals that have that, I know what I want to do, but then it's perfectly valid just to say, I'm going to explore and learn and just tackle opportunities and challenges and build up a set of experiences and have fun. Obviously research the company and the job. I don't necessarily put this at the top of my list. I like having exploratory conversations, but I know that a lot of my peers and just my own past experience, like if you haven't looked at the website and know what the company does and kind of demonstrate it, that's a showstopper. So I'll leave that on there. For your resume, sorry, again, I'm just dumping my thoughts here, so my apologies. I look at your resume needs to tell your story, who you are. It needs to be concise. It needs to be understandable. Get lots of opinions, but make sure it's something that you're proud of, that tells your story. The job of your resume is to get you that first interview. That's all you wanted to do. Get me in the door and get somebody to give me the time. And then that first interview, the only job of that one is to get the next interview and walk yourself down that line. So understand what the purpose of that resume is, to get an interview, to have somebody call you. It's not to accomplish, world peace or something like that. So be very deliberate in the purpose of why you have a resume and what you're trying to do with it. If you have a portfolio, make it accessible. I can't tell you how many applicants we've had in the last few months where they send me their portfolio and it's got a password, or it's not recognized by a Google search or whatever. So I'd say probably only 20% of the portfolios that get sent to me I can actually get into and look at. So send it to a friend outside of your school network and make sure that somebody else can get into it. And don't be afraid in an interview to ask, hey, is it okay if I share my story and put a visual with this? The value as an interviewer of actually seeing your work and having you walk through that story is incredibly powerful. And talk to the things just be really transparent. Talk to things like, I did this. This was my role on this team. This is what my team did. And here's how I worked with that team. Here's the value I brought forward. So that's a big question that we get as people are going through portfolios. And it's okay, but which part of this did you do? Tell that story of what you brought to the table in that group. I talked about channeling the preparation of the steps, resume is the first step, the interviews to get the next one, so on and so forth. I talked about having your pitch stories prepared, know what that, those couple of big projects that you had, or those couple classes, or, you coached a little league team and that put you outside of your comfort zone. It doesn't matter what it is, but those things that, again, capture who you are. Be ready to tell those stories and know how you might angle those into an interview in a appropriate way. That's really key to me. Practice your common questions. I mean, there's Google searches and everything else out there. I would never be able to name them all, but from our perspective, what interested you in this job? You better have an answer for that. What are your 3 greatest strengths? You better have an answer for that. Those are things that you just be concise, be specific. Those are things that you can prepare and hit home runs for every time. And those are the easy ones. Be ready for some challenging questions, but if you need some time to think about an answer, just say, I need a second on that one, or can we come back to it? In our world, that's fine. That's absolutely okay. Others may not like that. Consumers Energy, we don't really ask any, how many manholes would you cross if you went from New York, if you drove from New York to LA, you're not going to get that. I just sat in a colleague's interview today. She had some really good questions. I'm trying to think what they were. I should have made note of them, but drawing from work experience is really key. Just to make your strengths shine again. What defines you from other candidates is a really common question. Why should I really consider you versus somebody else? And then I'd say your questions, asking the team. Love for people to ask about culture. What is a day in the life like? Those are kind of some, they're kind of softballs, but they're really informative for you. What types of things would you be learning? Who would you be working with? I love the question on, how do I know a good culture fit when I see it? So, if you're kind of wrapping up that interview and you want to know, how well did I do, but you didn't really ask that question. You can ask the question of how do you, as an interviewer, identify somebody who's a good culture fit and is a good match for this job. Let them reflect that back to you, and most interviewers will give you a little bit of kind of give you a good answer, but also give you a little bit of that kind of assurance of hey, this is where you hit the mark. And have fun. like interviews are stressful. Practice, role play. The biggest thing that I can tell you about being in an interview is just being able to be articulate, be composed, and that just comes with practice. And I can tell you, just even doing interviewing is just as, I don't know, I would say just as, but it's a little nerve-wracking too. But the more you do it, you just get comfortable with the conversations. You start to learn what people are looking for and how to respond. So that's probably the biggest thing is don't just sit down with a roommate or a friend and it's awkward, but practice it. Questions? How helpful is that?
How would you craft like the perfect portfolio? Like, how do you do all that?
Do you guys have like online portfolios where you show your work and visuals and things like that? Is that standard that you do? So I would say most people have like I don't know any of the platforms, but they'll literally have a web URL that's their work, and they're showing screen grabs of their designs, even just having a picture of a workshop where you have sticky notes up on a wall, right? And you're drawing an ecosystem, or, here's a picture of a bunch of customers we interviewed, like just showing that you've got that. Give me some visuals that show me that you understand the types of activities that we're looking for, that you've got the language down of design thinking and, discovery and things of that nature. Like it just clicks with me. Okay, I can have a conversation with this person and they know they're picking up what I'm putting down and vice versa. And it doesn't need to be anything fancy. I mean, if you've got visual design skills, show them off. If you're a facilitator, show you facilitating a room or that audience, like just bring the work that you've done to life with just some imagery. If you've done, user flows and done, diagrams on user interaction, whatever that might look like. Typically you just structure it by your project. It's like, hey, this is the project I did. This was be able to articulate, this is the problem we were trying to solve. This is how we knew that was the problem. And here's what we were given. And here's how we addressed it. And the results that we got. And then always expect the question, what did you learn? What was your role? What would you do differently? Like be able to tell those stories of that kind of continuous improvement mindset and what you're learning out of these types of things is really key. That helpful?
Yes, still like trying to keep it vague, so we're not like giving out company secrets and all that. If it's vague, it's fine.
It is fine. So it's not unusual at all to say this was a project we did for an automotive client that's under NDA, and it's not unusual. I'll have people that maybe an image is a little bit blurry, like just enough that you can't read the words, or like I get the NDAs, I get the fact that you guys are working on projects that need some level of discretion, but you also have to be able to show your work, and there's a way that you can get creative and show that and tell your story without violating that NDA. Like you've got to look out for yourself too. So not saying violate your NDAs, but definitely find a way to tell that story and show your work.
What is your advice for people who don't have experience? Like, from where do they start? There was an input. So if we don't have experience, and I know I'm just doing, most of them are looking for a person who has minimum 3 years of experience in the field. So what is your advice? How we can make our resumes or interviews so expensive for companies? How we can encourage them to hire us, even though we don't have experience?
No, it's a great question. So I think the biggest thing is take advantage of any type of internship opportunity, or just finding projects, or Google certifications, things of that nature that just build up that repertoire that show your commitment to learning. And there's a lot of individuals out there that are coming right out of a school but don't have the actual practical experience. So anything that you can do to distinguish yourself from the person sitting next to you, or some sort of application. It's again, it's gonna come back to that story that you can tell. And that you grasp the concepts and that you're, ready to engage in a particular role, but don't let the fact that you don't have the experience scare you. Like you've got a little bit more climb. And obviously, how do you get experience without, if you're in that catch-22, right? Of I need experience to get experience. But it's finding those, those internships and things that just allow you to tell that story of where you've been. And I think even if you just get on LinkedIn and look at, like, do a search for people like you and see how they're telling that story and what they're doing, that is demonstrating that kind of track record and sequence. Even if it's only, a month at a time or 3 months at a time, you are building that track record. And don't be shy in telling the story of what you're bringing to the table and what value you have. Like, be confident in that. Don't apologize for not having experience. That's okay. It may not be what every employer is looking for, but we've all been there, have to start somewhere, and be confident in what you know, and don't be afraid to ask for the opportunities. Hope that helps. It's hard. I get it. It's a tough position to be in.
I have 2 questions.
Yeah.
So, would you please share some, process, some international students, they don't have familiar with the process in the US. So would you please introduce the interview process in your company or general process? And also, what are the frequently asked and most challenging questions? Can you show some examples?
Sure. All right. So repeat your process question for me.
Yeah.
So what
The interview process.
the interview process?
Yeah.
Okay. So sure. Ours is a little bit unique. We at Consumers Energy, I get very involved. I especially when we're growing like we are. I do a lot of outreach. I probably spend 25% of my time doing informational interviews. I do a lot of stalking on LinkedIn. Make sure you've got a good LinkedIn profile. And I just message people, and I'm selling the company as much as people are selling themselves. So I need to, people want to go work for Google and Netflix and Chewy and, all the big brands. And that's where I should say, I'm using big broad statements, obviously. But it took me a while to really figure out, like, what's the angle that I can bring to the table with Consumers Energy that's going to make people want to work for a Michigan utility. That's a sell, right? And so we know that sustainability, a sense of purpose, an environment that has a really great culture, and being empowered to make decisions and influence things are the biggest things that resonate. So my process to that is finding people that really have kind of those characteristics of the Google certifications, or coming out of a program like this, or the internships, whatever that might be, and getting them to respond to me in a LinkedIn message and say, hey, are you willing to have an informational interview? So I start with typically a 20 to 30 minute, hey, are you willing to talk to me? Day or night, I'm ready without feeling overeager. And I'll just have an informational discussion. And I just want to know, what your passions are. What do you love to do? The age-old question of, if you could spend your time doing whatever you want, what would that be? Like, what's your passion? In our world, I want people who are doing what they love to do more than anything else every day. And I will change job descriptions in order to help match that to people, and then figure out how to fill those gaps. So I'm out there selling the company and the opportunity. A pretty good track record. I've got the storyline down pretty well now. But then listening for what those passions are. And I need people who are very comfortable working in an unstructured environment. If you're looking for a place that what you're going to be doing every day, and the process, and everything's established, not the right place. Like you're not going to be happy. I'm going to be frustrated and you're going to be miserable. If you love working in helping develop and help us mature as an organization and love a new challenge every day and don't get discouraged when you hear 3 times in a week that we've never done it that way or whatever else, and that fires you up to say I'm going to figure out how a way to do that, you're in the right spot. So those are the types of cues that I start to look for. Obviously culture fit. People who ask me who start out with how much money they're going to make, or do I have to come in the office, like, okay, we're not aligned on the passion piece, so I'll move on to the next person. So I look for that passion. I look for those really core elements that I know are going to be successful in the company or have greater rate of success, and that they're here because they really want to make a difference in people's lives, and the energy sector is something that they can really relate to. So after I'm really making these long answers, I'm sorry. Am I people all late now? I'm missing your favorite Netflix shows. After an informational review with myself, I will typically ask one of my leadership team members to do kind of the same thing, to see if they're feeling about somebody the same way that I am. I would say a third of the time we disagree, and that's okay. We'll debate, whatever. Our first formal interview as a company is a panel interview. So typically an hour to an hour and a half long. We've done them in person. We've done them through Teams or Zoom. We do introductions, always give the individual a chance to tell their story. Who are they? What's the background? What do they love to do? Whatever, like how you tell your story up front. You've got that hook right away, and you've got people intrigued to listen to more, or you can lose them. So be prepared to tell your story. Don't go too long. Don't give. Oh, that's the other thing. I'm dancing all over. Be concise, but also make sure you're getting your point. If you find yourself wandering, reel yourself in. That's why the practice is so important. There's nothing's going to turn an interviewer off more than wondering when you're going to end your answer. You've lost them. So just be really conscious of that. Anyway, back to your question. So panel interview is typically 10 to 12 questions. They're very structured. They're awkwardly formal. We basically rotate the panel and ask the questions on. They're pretty standard questions. They're not there's nothing you're not gonna find on Google. But how do you work with team members? How would your team members define working with you? Tell me about a project that was challenging and how did you overcome it and get it back on track from either a timing perspective or a deliverable perspective. Just pretty normal stuff. After that formal interview, we have from an HR perspective within Consumers Energy, that's the only box we need to check. So we score people on a 1 to 5. We have verbatim remarks. And after that, it comes down to us as a hiring team of whether we want to do more interviews. Sometimes we'll have people on site to come meet the team, come see our design studio. That can really help, maybe get a candidate that's really strong to really lock them in that, okay, we're not just blowing smoke, we really know what we're doing. But after that panel interview, it's kind of up to us to say we want to do another round, or in some cases it just hits the mark and it's all right, we'll put an offer out in 24 hours. Anyway, so but that's pretty unusual. I from my feedback I've gotten from candidates, that's kind of unusual. You'll get some people might want you to do a design test, kind of walk me through how you would do this, how would you solve this problem. My history with interviewing is you start out with a single interview and you go talk to somebody else, and then you've got a panel, and then there's usually 3 to 4 steps. I don't subscribe to that. I pretty much know right away, but if I'm not sure, I'll bring you in. We'll do a come hang out with us for half a day sometimes. Just come live with us, see if you like the vibe.
Thank you.
Did you have a question? Oh, sorry, hand up. Okay. feel free to ask if you think of it. Yeah, go ahead.
So consumer energy is kind of like energy service providers, right?
Yep.
So, yeah, I think it's kind of random, but is there any demands of applications about electric vehicles from customers? Or is there any possibility to serve application or product using AR or VR?
Yep, so great question. So we are not to the maturity point of AR or VR. That just we're just not there. We have in some really small isolated places in the organization, we're exploring some AR, some VR. So for example, one of the biggest challenges we've got, I forget the number, but thousands of miles of underground pipeline. And that's all GIS located. But when you get out in the field and you're looking for that pipe, how can we use something like a VR system to really understand, like, okay, like this is where that pipe is, it's 4 feet down, like here's where some connector or something is, so we like know where to dig and dig safely. We're not in a place where that is systemic in the organization at all. It's more kind of just experimenting, and usually it's somebody who just is passionate about it to say, hey, boss, I'd like to go try this out, and they go experiment. EVs are another story. So let me think if I'm telling any secrets here. Like I said, we have committed to the state that we will put 1 million EVs on the road in our territory. And the governor has latched onto that, and she's now saying that we're going to put 2 million EVs on the road by 2030 in the state. We are basically looking at, we've done a whole bunch of research on EVs. So I guess the relatively short story is the biggest challenge. We know what the challenges are with EV adoption, right? So there's range anxiety, there's installing a charger. What type of charger do I need? There's a big adoption curve here, right? And that's going to change very quickly. I personally think that 1 million EVs by 2030 in 2 years is going to feel like an easy target. We'll see if I'm right. But what we've identified is that there is no central repository of information for customers on purchasing an EV. What type of charger do I need? How does it affect my rate? How far can I drive? Can I go to Traverse City for a weekend? There's a lot of unknowns. So we're currently in this early adopter phase where people aren't afraid to like go experiment and try those things, and they're going to go figure it out on their own. When you get to that more mass adoption, those challenges are going to have to be resolved, and they're not yet. They're still, dealers are not trained most dealers are not trained to sell an EV versus a internal combustion engine vehicle right now. And so we at Consumers Energy, knowing we have this 1 million target, are now developing a end-to-end journey, service, and product experience where you can come to consumersenergy.com, you can see what EVs are available, we can connect you with dealers to make a purchase, and then we will hook you up with a Consumers Energy concierge to help come out to your home, look at your circuit breaker, your distance that you need to run electricity to a charger, help you find the charger, and we'll install it for you. So that entire end-to-end turnkey service is something that we're going to provide. We're announcing that in July. I'm not sure that's public or not, so Dr. Kim, if you could take that out, that'd be great. But we're now in really aggressive plans for designing that digital experience that provides that kind of end-to-end service. We're building a network of electricians. Our designers are out designing, like, what does that experience need to look like? What are those peak experiences that we really need to nail, especially when you're using third-party installers for stuff like that? How do we need to provide and train for that to happen? So we're not going to get it right in July, but we're going to have a product out there that will then dive in really aggressively to measure it and iterate on. So that'll be our biggest starting point for EVs. We just installed so far this year 200 additional chargers across the state. So really investing in statewide charging stations just to take care of that kind of range anxiety challenge. We're working with some major commercial customers to convert fleets to electric vehicles. And then also looking at like small businesses and landlords and things like that, like multi-dwelling complexes of how do we need to develop a product so that they've got charging infrastructure in place at a local level. So there's a lot happening in EVs. I'm learning I'm not really good at short answers. I'm sorry.
Any other question?
What else?
June. Question?
Yeah.
I think like building off the question of like hiring people from a bunch of different like backgrounds and stuff, is there like a training process that you need to kind of get people acquainted to, you know, designing thinkers or like?
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's a really good question. So bringing in people who are experts, know the practice, have got a really deep experience set. They need to learn our company. They need to learn our internal clients and products that they're serving. They need, like, there's still a big learning curve there that we need to solve for. Bringing people in from the company who may know the way around, be networked, have a, you know, a great reputation, know how to get things done both formally and informally, but have zero, like, I'm only gonna bring people in that got just an incredible customer focus, right? They're ready to go solve our problems, but they may not be design thinkers. And so I've got a big investment to make in putting them through a design protocol. And typically, you know, I was gonna put a date on that, but like, we're never done. We continuously invest in our design team. But some people are starting out at a different phase. And then individuals like yourselves coming out of a program, you've got the basics. It's a matter of finding the types of projects where you can start to get applicable experience, be working with people that can help mentor. And then you're going to be spending your time really learning the company and the products, and just even being, you know, in a business environment and what does that mean, and being comfortable, like, asking questions and, you know, and like making yourself heard, and like, how do you, it's a big culture change, right? Like, especially not having something to draw from. So we invest there, but from a design practice specifically, so for example, last October, we put 10 people through Northwestern University's design certification program. It was a 10-week online certification. And some of the people we put through it are some of my best designers, but I wanted them to go through the same experience with some of the newer folks, to get to know them, to go through the shared experience, learn the same language. And that, I mean, that just, the more interaction that we can have as a team going through those things and creating the shared experiences, the better off we all are. We sent a handful of us went out to, this was probably unnecessary, but we went out to Harvard and went through a Harvard 3-day program. WMCAT, the West Michigan Center for Arts and Technology, is a really interesting organization in Grand Rapids. They focus on a lot of social causes, but they have a design thinking program connected with Stanford. And we have a really great partnership with them. We love partnering with Michigan companies. And so we literally have a small medium business project that one full day a month, our entire design team goes out to their studio and they work on a small medium business big project. That's a year-long project. They all get homework coming out of that Friday, but again, it's just creating these experiences where we can work on things together and share. And even, like I said, one day a week, just like building that capacity into our plans and making sure, like, from my perspective, making sure my colleagues are respecting the fact that this is important to us. And when I say, no, I can't do something, and hearing yet that we're, you know, every Friday we're out of the office or something like that, like, they need to understand why I'm doing that. But again, it's investing in ourselves and giving people the grace to really to come together as a team and to learn from each other. So we do a lot of investment in that training. In fact, we actually, two of my senior folks actually designed, I guess I need some perspective for this. So in August, we put 200 people in the company who were program owners for these energy efficiency products and things like that through Pragmatic Institute's product lifecycle management training. So really understanding product lifecycle and problem solving and or problem identification and stuff like that. There's 4 classes: foundation, focus, delivery, and design. And we actually decided that rather than have Pragmatic provide the design course, we created that internally from our team so that we could really make it tailored toward our processes, the tools that we use, the language we use. And so we train those 200 people and we offer 1 class every month. So it's coming from us and building that rapport and sharing our expertise and building the relationship with our internal clients that are, coming out of, they go in program owners, they come out product owners. There's a distinction there for us, but so again, just really creating that expertise internally and just continuing to share and to teach and to learn and listen. Like that's a big part of what we do.
Any more question? I think the time's almost up. So, okay, however, it was great, right? Okay, thank you so much for your great presentation.
My pleasure. My pleasure.